That's not a word, but I made it up. We're all welcome here. And so let's find our place in this circle. Let's hold this place and relish it and know that we're part of a community this morning. Know that we're part of creating something with each other, that we are part of something important in our lives, a place where we belong, a place where we can find a place that belongs to us, just as we are. And let's recognize, too, that regardless of where we've been, how good or bad our week was, how we're feeling, who we are, we're welcome and safe here. Thanksgiving for us this morning is not just a time for us to share gratitude for all the things in life that we can think of to be grateful for. But it's an opportunity today to be fully present in the world as it is, and to focus our eyes and hearts not on what our feeds and our news and our world tells us to focus on, but to focus on that which we find most important. To focus on what is most valuable in our lives. And to have those eyes and ears and hearts attuned to the principles of love, of community, of hope. And so on this Thanksgiving Day, let's start by sharing our gratitude, and we'll do it in song.
We gather in gratitude on this land that is home to so many, that for generations has been a traditional meeting ground and gathering place and traveling route for Cree people, Saulteaux, Blackfoot, Métis, Dene, and Nakota Sioux peoples. This land that is known as Treaty 6, and with which each of us, whenever it is that it became home for us, each of us have become partners in a covenant, in a promise, in a treaty, in a way of living in relationship with one another. We come into this day in gratitude for the gift of the land that we and so many call home. And we come seeking to be in right relationship with one another. For those of us that have been long in this land, our traditional peoples, for those of us whose ancestors came to this land from other parts of the world, for those of us who are newly in this land, we meet in this place with deep gratitude for the storied land we call home. Whatever else is happening in us and around us, above us are the stars. Beneath us is the soil, and within us is the light of life. We're here with each other to nurture all that gives radiance to our spirits. We gather in this circle with each other, seeking wisdom in story and song, in words and in silence, seeking wisdom within us, between us, beyond us and among us. And we gather in the presence of light, in our quest for more light in our lives for this day. And so we pause to center our thoughts on all that we know is worthy. This week we have marked the Feast of St. Francis Day, a day that often honors the gift of the natural world and the creatures with whom we share this magnificent planet. St. Francis has been attributed with giving us a prayer about being a channel for peace, and that prayer has inspired West Hill United Church in Scarborough to craft their own words to renew their commitments to life and to the world each week. And so I invite us to strengthen our intentions for the way we wish to live, offering the words they have given to us. As I live every day, I want to be a channel for peace. May I bring love where there is hatred, and healing where there is hurt, joy where there is sadness, and hope where there is fear. I pray that I may always try to understand and comfort other people, that I may also seek comfort and understanding from them. Wherever possible, may I choose to be a light in the darkness, a help in times of need, and a caring, honest friend. And may justice, kindness, and peace flow through my heart forever. Amen.
I did want to say good morning and happy Thanksgiving to you, though, this morning, and this is a great way that we can do that together. I wanted to talk about how kids are a really important part of spreading goodness in the world. That you are very powerful when it comes to spreading goodness. And I want you to know that. Maybe you feel that already inside you, that your real strong powers for goodness are within you. And I just want to say that anyone, whether you're tall or small or old or young or somewhere in between, can spread good and positive things to other people. So we're gonna do a little experiment this morning. I want you to look at your hand for a minute, and I want you to imagine that what you think about and what you feel right now is going to go flowing right into your hand, like you're a superhero. We're talking about powerful people, right? So you're a superhero, and all the good things you think and feel are going to flow into your hand. Okay, now I want you to reach into the middle of our circle here. Can everyone reach into the middle? And I want us to all grab each other's hands. And can you all reach? Can you all reach? Reach. And on the count of 3, we're going to give a little squeeze. Not a tight squeeze, just a little squeeze. And we're going to send all of that power of goodness that we have in our hearts and our minds. So we're going to still think about those things. And on the count of 3, we're going to squeeze. And we're going to share it with each other. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Oh, we did it. Okay, now we've got everyone's goodness in us, too. And could you all do me a little favor? Could you use your superpower skills? And could you find someone just close by? Someone that's not on our carpet right now. Maybe they're in the front row or the second row or somewhere close. Or maybe they're someone you came with, like a mom or a dad or a grandparent or who knows. And go and think those same good thoughts. Think of something really good. I'm going to think of Thanksgiving dessert. And give them a little squeeze on the hand, okay? All right. Are you ready? Let's go try it. Anyone you like. Anyone you like. Now, as we continue our chat on the rug, I want everyone in the room that gets a squeeze to pass it along. Infuse that squeeze with a good thought, with a good feeling, and give it to someone. We'll come back to this afterward, and we'll see what happens. But in the meantime, I want us to watch something up here because it's a story of one girl. And remember how I told us we all have this superpower to share good things, good feelings, good thoughts, goodness in the world. And I wanted to show you just one story of another girl who is in touch with her superpowers.
My name is Vivian. I'm 8 years old and I sell lemonade. I call my lemonade stand Make a Stand because I'm making a stand for child slaves. Actually, my parents were in a gallery in Sonoma and they brought home a book of slavery. I saw a picture of child slaves and I was completely startled. I didn't have a clue this was going on. It made me feel sad. I just think of me and my brother being slaves, and it just breaks my heart. They're being robbed of hope, and I want to give it back to them.
She just felt very strongly that we needed to do something right away. And so we thought about, okay, so, well, what can we do?
Vivian says, I want to start a lemonade stand and raise $150,000 to free 500 children. And our first response could have been, oh, honey, that's so cute. We'll do it for a day. It'll be wonderful. We'll squeeze lemons.
We've always been a sort of a why not family. We just say, why not? And we give it a try, and who knows where it's going to lead you.
Sometimes I forget that she's 8 because of what she's doing. And she doesn't have the foggiest idea of the impact she's having.
We make our lemonade at home.
Keep them coming.
And we freshly squeeze it every day. And I go out and I work, rain or shine, every single day.
She's just taken the whole family and we've just bonded together. It's been a really lovely experience for all of us to do this great cause together.
We don't call this a business, we call this a giveness. We make the lemonade to give to the people, and they give us money. We give the money to the organization Not for Sale, and they give the money to help child slaves. I believe one person can make a difference. Mother Teresa was one person, Gandhi was one person, Martin Luther King was one person. Why can't you be one person and help?
Thank you. You are perfect.
I would like other kids to know that they can make a difference and that they can help and they can do it. One little thing at a time.
I think that maybe all of us are doing wonderful small things to share our goodness with the world. And to spread that around. I want you to know that you can go home and figure out all kinds of things that you can do to share goodness with people. They can be little tiny things, they can be big things. But there's a website I want you to check out at some time when you're at home. It's called kidsareheroes.org. That's easy to remember because we just talked about that. Kids are heroes, right? So kidsareheroes.org, and there's totally tons of stories. Like on the next slide, you can hit on all these people from a whole bunch of different countries. They're kids, same age as you, some of them, that are doing amazing things to change the world and to spread their love and their goodness around. And people... Maybe you're doing something and you'll get nominated and you'll appear on there. It's an amazing thing. So just to show us how super we are, how much we're superheroes, I want to see if the goodness that we kind of put into our hands and shared with each other and shared with the room. Let's just ask, how far did those squeezes get? If you got squeezed, raise your hand. Hey, look at that. We did it, didn't we? We shared that goodness and that love and that good feeling and that good thought with the whole room. So imagine now when everyone leaves here and they do the same thing, and then they do the same thing, and then they do the same thing. We can change the world, can't we? Little things, little things. It's amazing. So all you superheroes, thank you for coming up here and sharing this time with us. There's projects to do at the table. There's other things that you can be a part of when we ask for people's little thoughts. I want you to start thinking right now of good things that you see around you, maybe at school or at home or with friends. Think of little good things, and we might ask you to share it a little bit later.
All right, written in the last quarter of the first century, Luke records this story, which no other gospel writer includes. As Jesus was speaking, a lawyer stood up to test him. "Teacher," he said, "what must I do to inherit eternal life?" And wanting to justify his answer, he asked Jesus, "And who is my neighbor?" Jesus replied, "A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho and fell into the hands of robbers, who stripped him, beat him, and went away, leaving him half dead. Now by chance, a priest was going down that road, and when he saw him, he passed by on the other side. So likewise, a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan, while traveling, came near him, and when he saw him, he was moved with pity. He went to him and bandaged his wounds, having poured oil and wine on them. Then he put him on his own animal, brought him to an inn, and took care of him. The next day, he took out 2 days' wages, gave them to the innkeeper, and said, 'Take care of him, and when I come back, I will repay you whatever more you spend.' Which of these 3 do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of the robbers?" The lawyer said, "The one who showed compassion to him." Jesus said to him, "Go and do likewise." In this well-worn parable, in which we seek new insight,
Life has been hard on our hearts this week. It's been a week of heartbreaking headlines. And it's also been a week of heartwarming humanitarianism and heroism. There have been the stories of our local police force responding to a crisis without ever firing a shot, of strangers coming to the aid of pedestrians on Jasper Avenue and preventing further harm. And then there have been the stories from the survivors of Route 91 Harvest Music Festival, of those who sheltered others with their bodies and those who pulled others to safety as bullets rained down from the 32nd floor, and those who rendered aid. And there have been the stories of individuals and organizations that came to the aid of Puerto Ricans with great compassion and also with deep respect. It's often that we remember tragedies by their shorthand, the ways we've named them. You know, the Oklahoma bombing, the Montreal massacre, the Vegas shooting. Or we remember them by the name of the perpetrator, the Timothy McVeighs and the Mark Lapines and the Stephen Paddocks. Or hurricanes for the nicknames we've given them, how Harvey has been followed by Irma and Maria, and now Nate is on its way. But it strikes me that ordinary and extraordinary acts of courage and compassion that emerge in the midst of disaster and violence are how I'd rather name these horrors in my memory. So this week, my attention has been captured by those who brought the best of their humanity to the worst of our inhumanity. And one of those people was Heather Goose. She was bartending at that music festival in Las Vegas. And in the chaos and the aftermath of the shooting, volunteers and emergency responders began moving victims through the bar area where she was working to a makeshift triage center on the street just beyond her. And she didn't choose to flee the grounds or seek safety anywhere else. She stayed there. And she comforted those victims that were being carried to the street near her kiosk. And we've heard the story of how she held the hand of a 23-year-old man as he died. How she went through his phone and discovered his last name and wrote it on his arm. And when his phone rang after he died, she answered it. And it was his girlfriend. They had gone to the concert together and they had become separated in the chaos of the shooting. And she called him from the lockdown hotel after she'd made it back there safely. And Goose was on the other end of his phone to tell her that Jordan had died of his injuries. And then she called his mother and listened as she shared the stories of her son. And she promised that mother that she would not leave him there alone, and she stayed with him for the next 5 hours until his body was removed from the scene, so she could tell his family where his body had been taken and assure them that he would not be a no-name body. She knew he was Jordan McEldoon. He was not John Doe. There are so many stories of those who do what they can and offer goodness even to strangers, bringing kindness in the midst of cruelty. And even in the 21st century, in a multi-faith, multicultural, diverse society of so many different literary canons, we still tend to call them Good Samaritans. We're still prone to name them after the hero in an ancient story, maybe the best known of all the stories attributed to Jesus of Nazareth. You know, we could have given this story a lot of different handles. It could have been the story of the bad robber, or it could have been the story of the ill-fated traveler, or the pious passerby, or just robbery on the road. But it's always been the story of the Good Samaritan. The story isn't named after the perpetrator, nor is it named after the victim. It's not named for its crime. It's named for the one who responded to an inhumanity with the best of his humanity. Like every good parable, this is a story that never happened and is always happening. Those hearing that story in the first century would know that it was set on a notoriously dangerous road, where a lone traveler would always be vulnerable to the elements and also vulnerable to exploitation on this dusty descent that drops over 1,000 feet through 16 miles of the Judean desert. Even today, guidebooks and locals will warn hikers about the danger of walking that wadi from Jerusalem to Jericho without the protection of a guide or a group or adequate preparation. It's still a place that exposes us to crime and the risks of dehydration. And this is a story that confronts us on a dangerous road with the dangers of the world and the dangers we sometimes pose to one another. It confronts us with the challenges and the choices of our human experience. It confronts us with seeing the things over which we have absolutely no control. And it also confronts us with the choices that we can make in the midst of cruelty. It confronts us with our capacity for compassion. Did you notice that we don't have this story because someone wanted to know how to make the world a better place? The writer who gave us this most famous story that Jesus was said to have told gave it to us as an answer to a very different question. It was a very individualistic question and kind of a pious question. He didn't ask, what can I do to make the world a better place? Or he didn't ask, how can I make a positive difference in the world? Or how can I make the world safer for others? It was self-interest that gave us this story. What must I do to secure an inheritance of all that is enduring in life for myself? This is a guy who's interested in racking up points. It's not a story that's prompted by an interest in the common good or public happiness, as Adrian Rich called it. It's driven by self-interest. Kind of like, what do I need to do to exceed my expiry date? Or how do I beat my best before date? And in typical fashion in the Jesus tradition, this unconventional rabbi, he tells this story with a lot of sharp edges and some very painful mirrors, a story that we've given a very easy moral, but it remains a story with very uneasy meanings. A story that speaks about how we walk a dangerous road, how we live in a dangerous world. And the first traveler we meet on the road is the victim. We know nothing about his identity. We know nothing about the circumstances that put him on this road. All we know is that he was attacked and injured while he was walking on this road. And likewise, we know absolutely nothing about the thieves who robbed him. We don't know anything about those who took his clothes and beat him and left him nearly dead. We don't know anything about the relationship between the victim and the attackers. We know nothing about what motivated this attack. We don't know why they took the clothes off his back. We only meet the victim of the story, and we never solve the mystery of who the perpetrators were or what their motives were for acting. And we know a little more about the next traveler. He's a priest. And since he's walking down this particular road, we might guess that perhaps he finished his priestly duties in Jerusalem and he's making his way home to Jericho. The story does tell us that he sees the injured man and he avoids helping him by getting further away, by choosing the other side of the road. And then the next traveler we meet is a Levite, a descendant of the tribe whose function is to assist the priests in their temple duties. And the assistant follows the same practice as his leader, and he distances himself from the injured traveler by crossing the road just to get to the other side without having to stop. And whereas we learn the identity of the priest and the Levite by their profession, what they do for a living, we learn the identity of the final traveler by what he is. What does the story tell us about him? gives us his ethnic and his religious identity. It's totally silent about his profession. Maybe the story tells us this because every listener knows this traveler would be subject to racial profiling in Judea. And the first thing anyone meeting him on this road would notice is that he's out of place. He's not a Jew in Judea. And he's not a Samaritan in Samaria. He's a Samaritan in Judea. He's a stranger, an outsider, a foreigner. And in the understanding of those first century listeners, he's a half-breed heretic. He is one whom every one of those listeners would be prejudiced against. He'd be the first one you'd suspect to be the perpetrator, and the last one you'd expect to be the first responder. Now, the form of the story is one we know really well. We know the third one's the one to watch. There's no surprise here. We know every joke turns on the punchline of the third guy. And while the formula has spelled it out for listeners across time to keep their eyes on the third guy, we will never fail to be surprised by who finishes this story. The privileged white child who's moved by the bondage of other children a world away. Or the complete stranger who holds the hand of a dying young man, or who carries loved ones and strangers out of the line of fire, or the one who pulls someone from the sidewalk to save them from a speeding vehicle. We'll always be surprised to see the best of ourselves responding to the worst in ourselves. The kindness that shines through cruelty, and the courage that moves compassion, and the sacrifices that are made out of concern for another. The good that finds expression amid the horrible. Those early listeners knew there was no such thing as a good Samaritan. Did you notice that guy that asked the question, he couldn't even get those words out of his mouth in the world of the story? When he's asked, well, who do you think was the neighbor? He couldn't say it was the Samaritan. All he could say was the guy that did the right thing, the one that was moved by compassion. Because a good Samaritan is an oxymoron. In first century Jewish ears, if he's anything, the Samaritan is the bad guy. He's the last one we'd expect to be the first one to help. And in the world of the story, he stands out both by who he is and what he does. He doesn't look away. He doesn't cross the road to avoid proximity. He doesn't appear to calculate what this could mean for him. He doesn't weigh the risks of his involvement. He could be the next casualty. Or surely he could have been perceived as being the perpetrator. And he's likely helping someone who, under ordinary circumstances, would refuse his help if he could. And his journey is altered by his compassion. His destination that night is with the injured guy. And the first thing on his agenda the next day is to ensure the continuation of this guy's care. And then he carries on with his own plans. He's not just the shining hero of the story. But he's an unthinkable, surprisingly scandalous hero. Sometimes we will be surprised not only by the good in the world, but we too will be shocked when the good in the world is authored by our Samaritans. The harassed Palestinian farmer tending to an injured settler, or the Black activist tending the wounds of the white supremacist, or the inmate giving CPR to the guard. The one who is spending hard-earned compassion on the opponent. And these stories we get from the Jesus tradition, they're not just nice little stories with a little moral. They're never tidy. This is an edgy, prickly story, and we cut ourselves on its every corner. It's a story about a lot of radical things like saving the life of your enemy. But it's also a story about being surprised by goodness where we don't expect to find it. It's also a story about times like this and people like us, who can sometimes find it hard to see deep beauty in great ugliness, or to focus on unspeakable kindnesses in the midst of unthinkable cruelty, or to celebrate where compassion supersedes callousness, or to recognize that there are those who go high in response to those who go low, proving that our highest humanity can still be expressed in the worst of circumstances. This once upon a time story is a story we live every day, a story that keeps inviting us to be surprised by goodness, and to headline those who help more than those who harm. And this is a day to ask ourselves what our broken hearts require of us. What our broken hearts require of us as we walk a dangerous road, a difficult road in perplexing times.
Can you think of a story of peace, caring, justice, reconciliation, hospitality, love? Things that you call the goodness in the world? So we're going to offer each other some of these stories. We're going to come around with some microphones for people who wish to share out loud these stories of goodness. But first I'll give you a moment to think, so we all have something in our hearts. So think about this autumn, what have you heard or experienced of the goodness in our world? Great, so maybe we're thinking about a story or a moment, an experience. And yeah, you can just give me a wave.
I was very heartened to hear in the news this week that the federal government has settled several class action lawsuits with the victims of the 60s scoop, and they have granted $800 million to the people who have come forward with action on this. It is a pittance because the more people that come forward, the less the awards will be, as low as $25,000. But still, it is something, and I'm grateful.
So I've been working with Kevin Cameron this week, and I don't know if any of you have heard of him, but he's a leading expert against violent threat risk assessment in our country. And he's worked not only throughout Canada in our school districts in various community centers, but also has helped to teach people in schools and community centers in the US. And so I'm going to share a quick little story that he gave on the differences of kindness. And we're ensuring within our schools that we have all of these steps in place to help prevent violence within our communities and our schools. Because a lot of people will say somebody just snapped and they don't see all the signs leading to it, but actually there are signs. And if we are all there to participate and support these people that are struggling, we can catch and prevent some of these tragedies. And so that's what we're learning. And we've been working on that within our school district for quite some time. And so he shared a story that within a school, there was a returning student that came and he had a bag full of guns and he was going into the school. And he saw some girls, 4 girls sitting there playing cards. And he kind of glared at them and they looked up. And then he walked by and then he came back and he looked at them. And he said, you know, can I play cards with you? And they were a little unsure because they didn't know him. And he was a bit older and he kind of glared at them at first. And they said, sure, play cards with us. And then they played cards with him. And then he left and he took that bag and he went and surrendered himself for that small act of kindness and has rehabilitated himself. And I'm just, after spending so much training with Kevin Cameron these last couple of weeks, it's really strongly impacted me to learn what we can do as a community to help find those small signs within somebody that will help prevent these tragedies. And I'm just so pleased that we have this person within our school and our province. And definitely we have some stars helping to fight and resist against this. So just thought I'd share that.
A school of 300 kids has raised $2,300 for the Terry Fox Run.
For me, walking outside the other day, I was introduced to a new cat in the neighborhood. And what I love about that is there's also so many birds in the neighborhood all the time, full of birds. So that's something I wanted to share, that image. Anyone else want to?
I did my turkey dinner yesterday, and the kids came, and Dexter came, and Sean's roommate, Sammy, had baked cookies and made a card for everybody, and it was just really sweet. So sometimes it's the little things, when Sean showed up for with a little something from his household to everybody.
The last week we've been struggling to get organized and kind of trying to do some fall cleaning, and we were working in our garage feeling quite overwhelmed, and one of our friends came over. He has triplets, but he came over, put everything down, and just said, well, what can I do to help? And really helped us get our garage organized when we were feeling quite overwhelmed.
Well, thank you. Thank you, everyone. Those stories just felt like the energy that the kids gave us, but verbally. It was so beautiful. Thanks so much. I also want to acknowledge all the experiences and moments, memories and stories that weren't shared out loud, but were nonetheless offered into this space in our hearts. So I hope we can bring these stories into our week. Maybe they can act as a lens for us, helping us to see in the world even more goodness.